Kwame Asante adjusted his designer kente cloth shirt as he gazed out from the balcony of their modern home in East Legon, Accra. At 34, he was considered one of Ghana's most successful telecommunications executives, his company handling major contracts across West Africa. Yet despite all his achievements, the one thing that mattered most to his family remained elusive. Beside him, 29-year-old Amma stirred her palm nut soup, her movements mechanical after 6 years of the same routine. Once, she had been the vibrant marketing director who caught his eye at a conference in Lagos. Her infectious laugh and brilliant mind had made him pursue her relentlessly. Now, the silence between them felt heavier than the humid Accra air. "Another invitation to Kojo's naming ceremony," Kwame said, waving the gold-embossed card. "His third child in 4 years." Amma's spoon clinked against the pot. She didn't need to look to know the expression on his face, the same mixture of envy and disappointment that had become all too familiar. 6 years of marriage, 6 years of hoping, praying, and enduring countless visits to fertility specialists, from Korle-Bu Teaching Hospital to private clinics in South Africa. 6 years of his mother's pointed comments during family gatherings, her voice carrying across their compound in Kumasi. "A woman who cannot give her husband children is like a tree that bears no fruit." The traditional healers had been worse. They'd examined Amma with knowing looks, prescribed herbs that tasted like bitter earth, and whispered among themselves in Twi about curses and spiritual blockages. Each visit had chipped away at her confidence, leaving her feeling more broken with every passing month. Kwame's family dinners had become battlegrounds. His 3 sisters, all mothers multiple times over, would exchange glances across the fufu and groundnut soup. Their children would run around the compound while Amma sat isolated, her empty arms a constant reminder of her perceived failure. "Maybe you should consider taking a second wife," his mother had suggested during their last visit, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Our ancestors understood that a man needs children to carry on his legacy." The argument started small, a forgotten appointment, a meal served too late, but always spiraled back to the same accusation. "6 years, Amma," Kwame would say, his voice rising above the sound of Lagos traffic outside their office building. "6 years of nothing. What use is a wife who cannot continue my bloodline?" Amma had tried everything. She'd suggested adoption, pointing to successful families in their church who had taken in children. She'd researched international fertility treatments, even proposed they seek counseling from the marriage ministry at their Presbyterian church. But Kwame's pride was wounded too deeply. His worth as a man, in his mind, was measured by his ability to father children, and her inability to conceive reflected his deepest fears. The night everything changed arrived with the Harmattan winds of December. Dust from the Sahara had settled over Accra like a brown blanket, and the air was thick with tension inside their air-conditioned home. Their latest argument had started over something trivial. She'd forgotten to confirm his flight to a conference in Abidjan, but quickly escalated. "I can't do this anymore," Kwame declared, his voice echoing off the marble floors of their living room. "I've built an empire, but what's the point if I have no heir to leave it to?" Tears streamed down Amma's face as she pleaded with him. "Kwame, please don't throw away everything we've built. We can find another way." "No!" He slammed his fist on their imported mahogany coffee table. "I've wasted enough time. Pack your things and go back to your family in Ho. You're barren, Amma. I won't waste another day of my life with you." The words hit her like physical blows. She gathered her belongings while he stood watching, his arms crossed, his expression hard as granite. Each item she packed felt like a piece of her heart being torn away. As she walked out into the dusty night, her suitcase rolling behind her on the uneven pavement, the security guard averted his eyes. The compound that had been her home for 6 years now felt foreign, unwelcoming. But somewhere in her despair, a quiet determination began to take root. What happens when life proves us wrong about ourselves? Don't miss the next chapter to see how Amma's journey unfolds. Like this video if you're rooting for her, and subscribe for more powerful stories of resilience and redemption. Amma's modest apartment in Adabraka was a far cry from the luxury she'd known in East Legon. The two-bedroom flat had cracked walls and a temperamental water pump, but it was hers. For the first time in years, she could breathe without walking on eggshells. She painted one wall bright yellow, the colour of hope, her grandmother had always said, and filled the small space with plants from the local market. Every kente cushion and carved wooden mask she arranged was a declaration. She was starting over, and this time she would do it on her own terms. The first month was the hardest. Lagos traffic seemed louder from her new neighbourhood, and the calls to prayer from the nearby mosque reminded her how alone she was. She'd cooked jollof rice for one, watched Nollywood movies she'd ignored during her marriage, and take long walks through the Makola market, letting the vibrant chaos of Accra wash over her tears. But solitude gradually transformed into something else. For the first time in years, she could make decisions without considering Kwame's approval. She started freelance marketing consulting, working with small businesses in Osu and Lebone. Her confidence slowly returned as clients praised her innovative campaigns. It was during one of her morning walks through Independence Square that she met Dr. Kofi Mensah. He was leading a medical outreach program, his gentle manner with the elderly patients catching her attention. Their first conversation was casual. He asked for directions to a nearby pharmacy, but something in his warm smile stayed with her. Dr. Kofi was everything Kwame wasn't. A pediatrician at Ridge Hospital, he seemed more interested in healing than accumulating wealth. When they kept running into each other at the Arts Centre weekend market, then at a mutual friend's birthday party in Tama, each encounter felt natural, unforced. Unlike Kwame, Kofi asked questions and genuinely wanted answers. Amma found herself sharing her dreams, how she wanted to start a foundation for underprivileged children, her love for traditional Ghanaian art, her fear that she wasn't enough. Kofi listened without judgment, offering encouragement instead of criticism. "You're not broken, Amma," he said one evening as they watched the sunset from the lighthouse in Jamestown. "You never were. Sometimes the right seeds just need the right soil to grow." His words were simple, but they echoed through spaces in her heart she'd thought were permanently damaged. Their friendship deepened naturally. Kofi's steady presence became a sanctuary, his laughter a healing balm she hadn't known she needed. He respected her pace, never pushing, allowing love to bloom like the hibiscus flowers in her new garden. As the months passed, Amma noticed changes in herself. She felt lighter, more confident. Her marketing business was thriving. She'd landed a contract with a major hotel chain in Takoradi. But more importantly, she felt worthy of love again. Then came the morning that changed everything. She'd been feeling tired, nauseous, different. At first, she attributed it to stress from work. But when she missed her period, something that had become painfully regular during her marriage, hope crept in. The pregnancy test showed two clear lines. Amma sank to her bathroom floor, laughing and crying simultaneously. After 6 years of being called barren, after countless doctors telling her it might never happen, life was growing inside her. Kofi found her there, overwhelmed with joy and disbelief. Without hesitation, he knelt beside her, pulling her into his arms. "We're going to be amazing parents," he whispered, his forehead touching hers. "This is our beginning, Amma, our family." Pregnancy became Amma's quiet triumph. Every flutter of movement, every change in her body felt like vindication. For 6 years, Kwame had blamed her, called her defective. Now she carried proof that she had been misjudged, that her worth had never been tied to his family's approval. Kofi was unwavering in his support. He attended every appointment at the clinic, helped transform their spare room into a nursery painted in soft greens and yellows, and spoke to her growing belly with tender certainty. Their evenings were filled with planning, choosing between traditional names like Akosua and Kwaku, discussing lullabies in Ga and Yue, preparing for a future she'd never dared imagine. As her belly grew rounder, so did her confidence. She walked through Osu Market with her head high, accepted congratulations from neighbours in Adabraka with genuine smiles, and finally began to see herself not as a woman discarded, but as a woman reborn. Meanwhile, Kwame remained unaware of her transformation. He'd filed for divorce 8 months after throwing her out, assuming it would be a simple formality. In his mind, she was still the broken woman who'd failed him, waiting somewhere in Ho for his decision. But life had other plans. The tables are turning. What will happen when Kwame faces the truth? Hit that notification bell so you don't miss the explosive courtroom scene in the next chapter. Comment below, do you think Amma deserves this happiness? Kwame Asante straightened his imported Italian suit as he walked up the steps of the Accra High Court on that sweltering March morning. The red dust from the Harmattan season still clung to the courthouse walls, but inside, the air conditioning hummed efficiently. At 35, he carried himself with the confidence of a man who'd never lost a battle that mattered to him. His divorce lawyer, Mr. Bempong, had assured him this would be routine. She hasn't contested anything, the elderly man had explained over star beer at the Golden Tulip Hotel bar. Most likely she won't even show up. Rural women from the Volta region don't usually fight these things. Kwame nodded, adjusting his gold wedding ring, the one he'd soon remove permanently. 8 months had passed since he'd sent Amma away, and in his mind it had been the right decision. His telecommunications company had landed 3 major contracts across West Africa. His mother had already introduced him to several suitable women from prominent Ashanti families. Life was moving forward exactly as it should. He'd even convinced himself that Amma was better off. She can find some teacher or civil servant in Ho, he'd told his sister Akosua over groundnut soup the previous weekend. Someone who doesn't need children to feel complete. The courthouse buzzed with typical Ghanaian efficiency. Lawyers in black robes hurrying between chambers, clerks shuffling papers, families waiting nervously for their cases to be heard. Kwame checked his Rolex, a gift from his board of directors. Everything was proceeding on schedule. Justice Ajay entered the courtroom, her judicial robes commanding immediate respect. She was known for her no-nonsense approach to family law, having handled some of Ghana's most high-profile divorce cases. "We will hear the matter of Asante versus Asante," she announced, her voice carrying clearly across the wood-panelled room. Kwame stood confidently, glancing around the gallery. A few court watchers, some law students, typical observers for a routine divorce proceeding. He barely registered the murmurs from the back of the room or the slight shift in energy as people turned toward the entrance. Then the heavy wooden doors opened, and time seemed to stop. Amma walked in slowly, deliberately, her traditional Kente dress flowing around her obviously pregnant form. The rich gold and blue patterns caught the morning light streaming through the courthouse windows. Her head was wrapped in matching fabric, and she carried herself with a dignity that took Kwame's breath away. The transformation was complete. This wasn't the broken woman who'd left their East Legon home with tears in her eyes. This was someone entirely different, confident, radiant, glowing with the unmistakable beauty of expectant motherhood. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Law students looked up from their notebooks. Court clerks paused their filing. Even Justice Ajay seemed momentarily surprised by the dramatic entrance. Kwame's expensive pen slipped from his fingers, clattering to the floor. His mind raced, cycling through impossible scenarios. Could this child be his? Had their last attempt somehow succeeded without his knowledge? The timeline seemed impossible, but hope and fear warred in his chest. His lawyer leaned close, whispering frantically, "Sir, did you know about this? We need to discuss strategy immediately." But Kwame couldn't process the words. His eyes were fixed on Amma as she moved gracefully toward the respondent's table. Every step seemed deliberate, measured, powerful. She wasn't the desperate woman who'd pleaded with him in their living room. She was something else entirely, victorious, untouchable, carrying life he could no longer claim. The whispers in the gallery grew louder. Kwame recognized some faces, colleagues from the telecommunications industry, a few society reporters who covered high-profile divorces. Word would spread quickly through Accra's tight-knit elite circles. By evening, everyone would know that Kwame Asante's barren ex-wife had appeared in court visibly pregnant. Justice Adjei tapped her gavel, calling for order. "Mrs. Asante, please take your seat." Amma settled carefully into her chair, one hand resting protectively over her rounded belly. The gesture was simple but powerful, a mother protecting her child, a woman claiming her space, a statement that needed no words. Kwame's carefully constructed confidence crumbled. Every assumption he'd made about control, about power, about his own worth suddenly felt hollow. The woman he'd dismissed as defective was sitting before him, carrying the very thing he'd claimed she could never provide. His chest tightened as he realized the magnitude of his miscalculation. For 8 months, he'd believed she was somewhere in the Volta region, broken and dependent on her family's charity. Instead, she'd not only survived, but flourished, found love, and created the life he'd said was impossible. The courtroom held its breath, sensing the drama unfolding. This wasn't just a routine divorce proceeding anymore. It was a reckoning, a moment where past cruelties would meet present realities, where assumptions would collide with truth. Kwame wanted to speak, to demand explanations, to reclaim some measure of control. But no words came. His throat felt constricted, his tongue heavy. All he could do was stare at the woman who'd once been his wife, now carrying proof that everything he'd believed about her and himself had been wrong. The tension is building to an explosive climax. What will Kwame do when faced with the truth? Will he fight for her or finally face the consequences of his actions? Smash that like button if you're on the edge of your seat, and don't forget to subscribe. The most dramatic moment is coming next. The air in the courtroom felt electric as Justice Adjei began the proceedings, but Kwame could barely focus on the legal formalities. His eyes remained fixed on Amma, searching her face for any sign of the vulnerability he remembered. Instead, he found only calm resolve and an inner strength that seemed to radiate from her very being. "Mr. Asante," Justice Adjei's voice cut through his thoughts. "You may present your petition." Kwame's lawyer nudged him to stand, but his legs felt unsteady. The speech he'd rehearsed about irreconcilable differences and the natural end of a childless marriage suddenly seemed inadequate, even insulting in light of Amma's obvious pregnancy. As he struggled to find his voice, the courtroom doors opened again. Dr. Kofi Mensah entered with quiet confidence, his white coat replaced by a crisp navy suit. He moved directly to Amma's side, bending to place a gentle kiss on her forehead, a gesture both intimate and public, a clear declaration of where he belonged. The simple action hit Kwame like a physical blow. His knees buckled slightly, and he gripped the edge of the petitioner's table for support. The man he'd never imagined as competition was standing beside his ex-wife, clearly the father of the child she carried. Murmurs escalated throughout the gallery. Court reporters scribbled frantically. The law students exchanged wide-eyed glances. Even the usually composed Justice Adjei seemed taken aback by the unfolding drama. Amma's voice rang clear and strong across the courtroom, cutting through the whispers like a blade. "Your Honor, before these proceedings continue, there's something the court should know." She rose slowly, Kofi's steady hand helping her to her feet. At 7 months pregnant, she was radiant, her skin glowing with health and happiness. Every eye in the room was drawn to her, but her gaze remained fixed on Kwame. For 6 years, my husband called me barren. He blamed me for our childless marriage, subjected me to public humiliation, and ultimately threw me out of our home because he believed I was defective. Her voice never wavered, each word precisely delivered. But as this court can clearly see, I was never the problem. The silence that followed was deafening. Kwame felt the blood drain from his face as the implications of her words sank in. Not only had she moved on and found love elsewhere, but she was publicly declaring that their inability to conceive had been his fault, not hers. Gasps echoed off the courthouse walls. Spectators leaned forward in their seats, sensing they were witnessing something extraordinary. The court stenographer's fingers flew across her keyboard, capturing every word of this unexpected testimony. Dr. Kofi stepped forward slightly, his presence lending quiet support to Ama's declaration. His reputation in Accra's medical community was impeccable, a respected pediatrician known for his integrity and compassion. His very presence beside her lent credibility to her claim. Kwame's world tilted on its axis. Every accusation he'd hurled, every moment of public shame he'd subjected her to, every cruel word spoken in anger, all of it was now revealed as projection, as his own inadequacy masked by pride and tradition. "This can't be," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the courtroom murmurs. But Ama wasn't finished. "Your Honor, I endured years of blame from his family, underwent countless medical procedures, and was made to feel worthless because I couldn't give him children. The truth is, his pride prevented him from ever being properly tested. He preferred to blame me rather than face the possibility that he might be the one with fertility issues." The words hung in the air like thunderclaps. Kwame's hands shook as he processed the devastating accuracy of her statement. He had refused several doctors' suggestions for comprehensive testing, always insisting that if there was a problem, it had to be with her. His masculine pride couldn't bear the thought that he might be the cause of their childless marriage. Justice Ajay tapped her gavel firmly. "This is highly irregular, but given the circumstances, I'll allow Mrs. Asante to speak." Ama's hand moved to rest on her belly, emphasizing the undeniable proof of her fertility. "This child I carry is evidence that I was never barren, never defective, never the failure he painted me to be. Dr. Mensah and I are expecting our first child together, proof that with the right partner, love and life flourish naturally." The courtroom erupted in whispers and gasps. Some spectators shook their heads in sympathy for Ama. Others stared at Kwame with barely concealed judgment. The wealthy telecommunications executive, who'd been so certain of his superiority, was being publicly unmasked as a man who'd destroyed his marriage through pride and misplaced blame. Kwame's expensive suit suddenly felt like a costume. All his wealth, his business success, his family's prestigious name, none of it could shield him from this moment of complete exposure. He'd built his identity on being right, on being in control, on being the victim of an inadequate wife. Now that foundation was crumbling in front of dozens of witnesses. His lawyer tugged at his sleeve, whispering urgent advice about damage control, but Kwame couldn't process the words. His mind was trapped in a loop of memory and regret, replaying 6 years of marriage through this new devastating lens. Every family gathering where he'd allowed his mother to shame Ama. Every argument where he'd questioned her worth as a woman. Every night he'd turned away from her in their bed, convinced she was broken. All of it was revealed now as his own failing, his own inadequacy projected onto the woman who'd loved him despite his cruelty. Ama remained standing, her dignity intact, her truth spoken. She didn't need to say more. The evidence was literally growing inside her. Undeniable proof that she'd been misjudged and mistreated for years. The truth is finally out. But how will Kwame respond to this devastating revelation? You won't believe what happens next. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell because the final confrontation is about to blow your mind. The weight of Ama's revelation settled over the courtroom like a heavy blanket. Kwame stared at his ex-wife, his mind reeling as 6 years of assumptions crumbled around him. The confident telecommunications executive who'd walked into court that morning was gone, replaced by a man confronting the magnitude of his own failures. Unable to maintain his composure any longer, Kwame's legs gave way beneath him. His expensive Italian leather shoes scraped against the polished floor as he fell to his knees before Ama, right there in the center of Ghana's High Court. His carefully pressed suit wrinkled as he collapsed, all pretense of dignity abandoned. "Ama, please," his voice cracked, the words echoing off the courthouse walls. Tears streamed down his face as he reached toward her, his hands trembling. "Please don't go through with this divorce. That child, we can work this out. I was wrong. I was so wrong about everything." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Court reporters scribbled frantically, capturing every moment of the unprecedented scene. Law students watched in shocked silence as one of Accra's most prominent businessmen unraveled completely in public. Justice Ajay banged her gavel sharply. "Mr. Asante, you are out of order. Return to your seat immediately." But Kwame couldn't hear anything beyond the roar of his own desperation. "I'll do anything, Ama. I'll change. I'll make amends to your family. I'll publicly acknowledge my mistakes. Just please, don't take this away from me." His voice grew more frantic as the full impact of his losses hit him. Not only had he thrown away a loving wife, but he'd done so based on his own inadequacy. The child she carried, the gift he'd longed for, would never be his. His family name would die with him, not because Ama was barren, but because his pride had destroyed the one relationship that could have given him everything he wanted. Ama looked down at him with an expression of calm resolve. There was no hatred in her eyes, no desire for revenge, only the quiet strength of a woman who'd found her worth again. "Kwame, this isn't a negotiation. You made your choice when you called me barren and threw me out of our home. You don't get to unmake that decision now that it's convenient for you." Dr. Kofi stepped closer to Ama, his presence a silent reminder that she was no longer alone, no longer vulnerable to Kwame's manipulation. His reputation in Accra's medical community spoke volumes. This wasn't a man who would ever treat her as Kwame had. "Please," Kwame begged, his voice breaking. "I see now. I understand. You were never the problem. It was me, my pride, my refusal to get tested, my cowardice. I blamed you for my own failures." The admission hung in the air like a confession. For the first time in 6 years, Kwame was speaking the complete truth about their marriage, acknowledging the reality he'd hidden from even himself. But his honesty came too late, offered only when he faced losing everything. Ama's hand moved protectively to her belly, emphasizing the life growing within her, life that proved conclusively she'd been misjudged. "For 6 years, you let your family call me barren. You let them suggest you take a second wife. You made me feel worthless, defective, less than human. And when I couldn't take it anymore, when I begged you to consider that maybe we should both be tested, you threw me away like rubbish." Her words cut through the courtroom with surgical precision. Every spectator could feel the weight of years of emotional abuse, the systematic destruction of a woman's self-worth by a man too proud to face his own limitations. Kwame's shoulders shook with sobs. "I was a fool, a proud, stupid fool. But we can fix this. I'll do whatever it takes." "No, Kwame." Ama's voice was firm but not cruel. "Some things can't be fixed. Some choices can't be undone. You had 6 years to treat me with love and respect. You chose cruelty instead. Now I've found someone who values me for who I am, not for what I can produce." Dr. Kofi's gentle presence beside her was a stark contrast to the man weeping on the floor. Where Kwame had demanded and blamed, Kofi had listened and supported. Where Kwame had seen only failure, Kofi had seen a woman worthy of love and respect. Justice Aje's voice cut through the emotional chaos. "Mr. Asante, if you cannot compose yourself, I will have you removed from this courtroom. This is a court of law, not a place for personal theatrics." Kwame's lawyer finally managed to pull him to his feet, whispering urgent reminders about legal procedure and public dignity. But the damage was complete. In front of dozens of witnesses, including several prominent members of Accra society, Kwame Asante had been exposed as a man who'd destroyed his own marriage through pride and cruelty. As court officers moved to restore order, Ama and Dr. Kofi stood to leave. They walked slowly toward the exit, her hand in his, their connection obvious to everyone present. She didn't look back at Kwame. There was no need. The chapter he'd tried to control had closed without him, and her life was moving forward with purpose and joy. Behind them, Kwame remained broken, supported by his lawyer, and facing the reality that his assumptions about masculinity, control, and worth had cost him everything that truly mattered. The courtroom buzzed with whispers that would soon become gossip throughout Accra's social circles. The divorce would be granted, of course, but more than a legal judgment had been rendered that day. In the High Court of Ghana, truth had prevailed over pride, and a woman who'd been cast aside had proven that her worth was never dependent on anyone else's approval. What a powerful ending to this incredible story. Sometimes life teaches us that what we throw away in pride, we can never reclaim. Ama's strength reminds us that our worth isn't defined by others' judgments. What did you think of this story? Comment below with your thoughts, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful tales of resilience and redemption. Share this with someone who needs to remember their own worth today.